famed author Clive Cussler,
the hero Dirk Pitt.
The Mediterranean Caper. Episode 6. Cat Food and Bowel Drizzlies.
With my witty banter, my son lost his front tooth. It was looking so gnarly. It was coming out. He looked like a depiction of any hillbilly you've ever seen in a cartoon. It was like going off to the side, and it was a buck tooth, and then it was parallel to the floor. And he finally just yanked it out like a madman. Like he was like, he's like a frat boy, like that would crush beer cans on his head. Only he's 8, so he hasn't had beer yet, but he'll get there. So he just took the tooth and ripped it out. He's like, I'm done with this.
He's not like, I just want to see how long it'll stick around and whistling.
And
can't do that right anymore.
And he doesn't believe in Santa. He'll ruin that for any kid who crosses his path. Easter Bunny's a no-go. Tooth Fairy, still alive, still kicking. How was your week?
Week was good. We're gearing up for more record high temperatures. The province is on fire. There's rampant flooding, but my oldest got a job.
I'm sorry. That's cool.
It's a mix, up and down.
So the flooding and the fires at the same time. It's very West Coast of you. Very coastal elite of you to have fires and flooding at the same time.
Well, we have all the forests and we have all the snow-covered mountains. So spring is when they all decide to go crazy.
What temperatures do you have right now?
We're getting up to 33 degrees, which is, 90 Fahrenheit?
It's like 104.
Celsius, and Fahrenheit is 91.4, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But that is really freakishly high for up where I am. I'm pretty far north.
And it's only early May, too.
Yep.
That would be high for...
That's why it's going to be record high temperatures. Like last week was the hottest April 30th we've ever had ever. And now we're gearing up for the hottest May 12th we've ever had ever.
Those aren't good records to break. Oh.
No. Not when I live in the middle of a black spruce bog.
So you can have both at the same time just where you live, where you dwell.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And it gets very humid. Oh yeah, we're so proud. We'd like to thank the Academy for this honor.
Well, the mosquitoes have to be the size of pterodactyls.
They're not that big. They get like real big as you get north into the Yukon, and you also get the horse flies that are big enough to knock your glasses off. But where I am, they're very, very numerous, and the fact that I haven't seen them is concerning. Like that's got to be like any day now. They're gonna. Yeah,
you're doomed for it because if it's wet and hot, they're coming for you.
Yep.
If they can't fly through the screen door, they'll open it themselves, right? That's the saying with mosquitoes.
All right.
Oh, nice. What are you drinking today?
Yes, I make sure to get that sound. I am drinking my favorite beer that I made sure to get for this special occasion, the Cannery Brewing Heist Maple Stout, commemorating the maple syrup heist in Quebec, where they stole like $10 million of maple syrup.
Yes, they had
an amazing part of history.
They had specialized grabbers. Like, didn't they have like a hand truck that had a special barrel grabber? That's the only way they could steal so many.
It was all custom made, a bit fancier than a smash and grab, and now that just makes me think that there's an illegal black market maple syrup supply.
Oh, there definitely is.
Which is very Canadian.
That is.
I don't want to lean into all of our racist tropes, but we do love our maple syrup.
For the outro, I have science questions to ask you.
Uh-oh.
Based on the book. No, you'll get them. You'll get them.
Welcome to Cussler Hustlers, the best Clive Cussler podcast you've ever heard. I'm your co-host Topper, here with my co-host Nancy.
Hi, this is the sound of my voice. That was the sound of his voice. And today we are finishing up the Mediterranean Caper, chapters 15 through the end. The goddamn end.
I think most of 14 too, because we only got we kind of stumbled into chapter 14 last time. But yeah, 14 to 18 and the epilogue. And I realized we could get through this in one episode. It might be a bit of an extra large episode because it's all talking.
It is a lot of talking and glaring.
There's so much talking. So yeah, let's see. At the end of the last episode, we basically talked about how Pitt and Giordino and Zakynthos and Zeno all became friends, realized they're on the same team, realized they're all working together to bring down Von Till.
Oh, and Darius too, yes.
And Darius. And chapter 14 is just them talking back and forth. Like, it starts off with with the phrase, Pitt explained everything. Basically, they yada 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 off camera have Pitt explain how he solved the entire thing. And then, for the reader, they have Pitt explain it again. And he explains how the ship is remote controlled with a lot of really weird metaphors and similes. He explains that there's a submarine stuck to it, and he describes it as like the Artemisia was pregnant with a submarine. They explain how they do all the drops at night to avoid detection, and how it's very obvious that the boat isn't going to Chicago, because while Dirk Pitt might not have facts on his side, he does have his gut and intuition.
And that is truly all he needs. He has a bird's eye view given to him by God. He was touched in all the best ways: fashion sense, his taste in women, his judgment, and the way he looks at the world is very interesting.
I like the concept that when all the heroin is offloaded, every underworld figure and drug dealer will be on hand for that big of a haul, like it's a convention. I'm not sure how the drug trade worked in 73, and there's a couple of more points about the drug trade I'm going to get to in this episode.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure everyone shows up and like draws lots and waits for their crate of heroin.
Well, it's like a buffalo. When you cut the buffalo up, like if we're if we're bivouacking, we're a hunting party, and we've bivouacked and we've got our kill and we're dividing it. Everyone gets equal lots because we were all there when the animal was killed. No, they're drug dealers. They're not going to tell anybody else. This is like when I was in high school, my parents were like, well, what if somebody offers you drugs? I'm like, they don't. They cost money. Drugs cost money.
Yeah.
Nobody offers you free drugs. That's not a thing.
They want to get you
unless you're really, really hot.
I never got free drugs except from a couple of friends.
Well, you have good friends, and they thought you were hot.
So yeah, they have more arguing because Dirk thinks they're going to do one thing, Zakynthos thinks they're going to do another, and Zach wants to wait until the drop happens so they can arrest everyone, and Dirk's like, no, we have to get them now. What about all the human trafficking? And they just go back and forth until Zakynthos draws a gun and tries to arrest Dirk.
Oh,
and
yes.
Al, I guess. But then Al draws a gun and arrests them back. And then the chapter ends with everyone going, all right, then, we're just going to go our own way.
They made a point to say that Al's gun is very small, but still a gun.
Yes, there was a lot of fun with that. I had it written down. It was like a Mauser. Oh, the gun was a pocket Mauser favored by European women.
Al gets done dirty at every point. He always comes to us in the middle of a scene. He's always popping out after a hard day at the mozzarella fields. And they always put in a dig. He's always, gorilla armed or tiny gunned or mean mugged or he's never, hey, he came to save the day. It's always like he did, but also to remind you, he's very ugly.
Yeah. And now that was all of chapter 14. Like, it was just basically one long ass argument followed by a Mexican standoff. And chapter 15 starts off with Pitt making fun of Al for the gun, examining the gun, and then tossing the loaded gun onto Al's lap and saying, oh, and the safety was on.
Gun safety is paramount for Dirk Pitt.
Although he does ask where Al got the gun. And that actually is a good point. Although it raises further questions.
Yes, it does. And then the safety, Al comes back with the safety line at the end of the show, at the end of the program.
Yeah.
At the end of the book. There wasn't much going on when they were just talking, coming up with a plan. He described the ship, the ghost ship. People weren't on there. They were all in the hull, underneath everything, getting something ready.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. It's a lot of talking until they go back underwater with his team of scientists to go into the submerged mountain.
I was going to say, you skipped over one important bit because we're back with Terry on the first attempt. And this chapter is really kind of skeevy.
Oh, yes, everything with Terry is.
They walk back on the boat and find Terry holding court in a makeshift bikini, and it's just repeated mentions of skin, flesh, curves, porn, lecherousness. I wrote these all down. Stares, zeal, lusts, box office sex queens, because she's the only woman on board and she's very, very popular. And then there's a message that Pitt has a whole bunch of messages waiting for him in the radio room, where we're introduced to a young black in his early 20s.
Who it's obvious that this guy is being poisoned.
Yeah.
And Dirk's like, totally okay with that. Hope it works out for you.
He's not named. He's referred to as the Black.
I know. I went back.
The Black, over and over again.
I went back because I'm like, what about this poor man? Because I thought he was given a name. I'm like, does he have long-term consequences for this repeated poisoning that he's enduring? Because he's yakking over the side of the boat.
They make it really obvious that it's Terry that's poisoning him because he's like, oh, I've been sick for the last 24 hours. But fortunately, that baby brought on board's been hovering over me for the last 24 hours, bringing me tea.
There is nothing women love more than to be free labor for men that are sick who they don't know.
I know.
Like, yes, I'll be your Florence Nightingale for no pay. Who are you? I don't even know you. But hey, that's the first indication that something's up. It is laid on real thick that she's the babe on the boat, and I didn't even, the words just washed over me. I didn't even absorb them because it's been so much of the male gaze throughout this whole book whenever she's in the scene that, oh yeah, of course she's going to be skeevy when Terry's in the picture.
Mm-hmm. And then we get a scene of him being skeevy and also possibly abusive because he goes back to his quarters and there's Terry sitting on his desk. And he asks her about the makeshift bikini, and she takes half of it off and asks if he wants to keep going. And he's like, no, I have questions. Then he interrogates her.
She's been sewing all day. I mean, she made those knots in the bikini. She's going to be tired.
He starts shouting at her that her uncle is human trafficking scum, that all of her money comes from drugs and pain and misery, confronts her about why she was so sad and crying before he was sent into the murder tunnel way at the beginning. She's sobbing and saying that he has to believe her. But then she starts saying that now she hates him and she wishes he was dead. And now she's angry that she's being held prisoner on this boat despite having just the time of her life until now.
Yes.
And I stand by my assertion that Dirk is bipolar. I mean, maybe he medicates it in later books because it doesn't come up as much. But he is he's happy, he's cheerful. He has a panic attack while talking to the radio operator. And now he's just doing the 24 Jack Bauer interrogation on Terry in his quarters where no one can see him. And
it's a hair trigger. His anger comes out. You don't know if you're joking around with him.
The epilogue has an amazing hair trigger.
Yes.
Yes.
Don't
let me forget that one.
The receptionist, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the best line was by the radio operator, and I wasn't prepared to read this. The poisoned man, the one who was labeled the young black youth, who had no name, this poor man, had bowel drizzlies.
Yeah, there were a lot of colorful metaphors.
Page 282, bowel drizzlies. I could have lived a lifetime without reading that description.
Well, that's the name of the that's the name of the episode.
It should have been the Green Apple Two-Step, something civilized.
So he says to her that he found a map to an underwater cave where Von Till, hides his submarine, which he hasn't.
Well, yes, he's doing his bird's eye view. His godlike perception is in play. But
he says he has a map because if the reader is astute, he knows that there's something up with Terry. He's feeding Terry false information. And then she immediately runs out, probably to give the radio operator some tea. And then Dirk passes out again, because Dirk never just lays down for a nap. He only passes out from mortal exhaustion.
Which is healthy. He's operating on all 12 cylinders.
Oh, yeah.
Or 8 cylinders. Whatever vehicle you have, he's operating on all of those cylinders. We had a Toyota years ago. It was 3 cylinders. Couldn't go uphill. But I digress. He's never well rested. That's true for battle. When you think about history, whenever men are going into battle, they're covered with body lice, they're exhausted, they have dysentery.
Mm-hmm.
So they're always at a disadvantage when you're preparing to fight somebody. Historically, maybe he's just trying to emulate the American forefathers. He's doing best to be beaten up to black and blue before every battle for the advantage.
Yeah, I mean, that is the flavor of manliness that runs through all these books, is through just sheer willpower he overcomes exhaustion and gunshot wounds and being crushed in avalanches and drowned and stuck on icebergs and just all this stuff, just through sheer pluck and grit.
Now, to tell you how much pluck and grit the armed forces of the U.S. does not have. You had off-air mentioned that you liked Jason Pargin, formerly of Cracked.
Yes.
He was on another podcast called Secretly Incredibly Fascinating
I
about
love Sif Pod.
about air conditioning. And they talked about how the U.S. troops spend when they were in Afghanistan, they spent like a line item of $1 trillion a year air conditioning the troops when they were overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan because it's a force multiplier. If you have troops that are comfortable and well rested, it is eons better than having them sleep rough and prepare for battle or any task not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
We send our guys into battle now as close to comfortable as possible for maximum efficiency, and they're air conditioned, and they have snacks and probably juice boxes because they're all so much younger now. Whenever I see somebody not in uniform, I'm like, does your mom know where you are? You look like you're 8. But Dirk Pitt is always injured and near passing out. He's just on the edge. He's on the bleeding edge at all times.
And we get to chapter 16, which is a very short chapter because it's just like 4 line items in my notes here. And yeah, that's where the first attempt pulls up to the cliffs and Dirk and his army of nerds in Speedos gets ready to dive.
Yes, they did mention all the men wearing black Speedos. Listeners, for the female persuasion, that was for you. All those men in black Speedos. That was written for us. Take it, put it to your heart, be warm. Be warmed by that thought.
And with beards, because the only 2 scientists who get named, one is a big blonde with a beard, and the other is a big redhead with a beard.
Oh yes, Ken Knight, and the other guy, the other guy,
blonde.
And one of them has a pinched griffin face. Oh no, that's Admiral Sandecker. Sandecker has a griffin face.
I love that line. That was very evocative.
Yes, and
he looks like an eagle. I mean, he's played by William H. Macy in the movie. So he's like a small, thin, intense man is the vibe you get from Sandecker through all these books.
Oh, I love William H. Macy. I didn't know he played him in the movies. That's great.
Yes. At some point, actually, yeah. It's going to be a while before we get to Sahara because that's the McConaughey movie. They made a movie out of Raise the Titanic, which was the 4th book, but it was like a made-for-TV, low-budget movie.
The McConaughey movie was so long ago. Oh my goodness!
It was like 2005 when they realized, like, this guy has sold 100 million books. There's only one movie no one's ever seen. How has nobody optioned this? And then they made Sahara with Steve Zahn and Matthew McConaughey and William H. Macy, and a lot of people who look African and Arab, but are all like Mexican and Puerto Rican, because it's Hollywood in the early 2000s. They have dark skin. That's enough.
Well, sure.
And that movie was actually really, really good. Like, it was kind of entertaining. Everybody looked like they were having a lot of fun, and it bombed, and no one's ever optioned Cussler again.
It was in defense, it was a perfect movie. It wasn't. There's a lot of good-looking people. Everyone was gorgeous. For the ladies, the men pretty much did all take off their shirts. Matthew McConaughey does not miss a moment of taking off his shirt in any movie ever. So hey McConaughey. It was campy. It had a happy ending. It's like the Mummy with more sand.
It cost $160 million. It made $120, and then Clive Cussler sued them for blackmail and sabotage.
Blackmail? Oh, wow. What were they doing to him that he sued for blackmail?
He countersued after accusations from the studio of blackmail and sabotage, that like he was trying to sabotage the making of the film, and the studio won and cost him $20 million. And then that was overturned, and is so much weirdness happened behind the scenes with that movie. It's a perfectly good movie.
Oh, wow.
Like it's doing really well on Netflix. Like, people are like, this was great, actually. What happened?
It is great. It's fun. Yeah. It's like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. You're not going to learn anything, but you'll come away happy. I love that movie too. Bees.
Chapter 16, you can burn through real quick with the army of Speedo nerds jump in the water. They find the cave almost immediately because, of course, they do. It's directly underneath Von Till's villa.
The lair.
And they explore the cave, and there's nothing there, and Dirk has a major depressive episode. And then one of the bikini soldiers points out that all the kelp is from the Pacific, not the Mediterranean. And they realize that the kelp is plastic. So they keep swimming, and they find the second cave behind the first cave.
Yes, make a note of the plastic kelp.
Yes.
I'll be asking you about that later, because there is a line that is very peculiar after they mention that. So they push aside the plastic kelp and discover the true cave for the pregnant ships is the secret kelp cave, and they find 2 submarines.
But they also find Von Till, and they find Darius, and Darius has a gun because Dirk Pitt led all of them into a trap. Because of course he fucking did, because he tried so hard to tip off everybody as to what he was doing. He told Terry that he found a map with the cave, knowing that she was, radioing to someone. He told Zach and Zeno that he's like, to hell with you, I'm going to take down Von Till on my own, after they'd established that Von Till obviously had a mole inside the DEA. So, Dirk Pitt set up this trap as hard as he possibly could, and then walked into it, and he's surprised.
Well, this is this was copied exactly in a real life scenario called Grenada. Ronald Reagan said he was going to invade. So who was on the beach when the Marines landed? CNN. They were already there. So if you tell everyone shows up. He just knows how to throw a party. Yeah. So Darius is a dirty double-crosser, and he's got his gun, stabbing Pitt with his gun.
I believe it's called shooting.
In the back. No, he didn't shoot him yet. He was poking him in the back.
In my notes, it's almost immediately Darius shoots him in the leg. But yeah, I mean, Dirk is up.
There's a minute.
There's a minute. We're getting to the good stuff.
Yeah. But they go about this cave is a wonder of marine life. It's so beautiful, and huge, enormous, huge, cavernous, under a bad guy's lair. So you can only imagine the 007 ofness. Mm-hmm. The whole scene is magnificent, colorful. The baddies are in force with machine guns lining the cave, pointed at
There's goons.
At the team. Yes, Goon Squad.
Now, this is also where Mr. Cussler definitely reveals that he loves his naval research, because they spend a couple of paragraphs talking about how one of the submarines is a Japanese I-boat, which is a very, very cool device. It's a submarine that could launch short-range aircraft. It was a submersible aircraft carrier. And they only made 8 of them. And they used them a couple times on the West Coast in World War II. And they didn't have much effect, and a few of them sank. But that is where the Hawk of Macedonia went when it was partially blown up. It flew back to the submarine, landed, went back in its tube in the front of the submarine, and then they never found it again.
Of course not. It went back to its mothership.
Yes.
Underwater, as it were. Which is a really cool concept, and he does get points for knowing about that submarine. That is wicked cool.
Mm-hmm. After I read this, I went down a bit of a wiki dive on the I-boats, and they're fascinating. And then that went into a dive, which coincided with a couple episodes on the Japanese Navy from Lions Led by Donkeys, which is a great military history podcast. You listen to Well, There's Your Problem, so you know that Liam is basically the co-star of Lions Led by Donkeys.
Oh, I've given it a listen, but I haven't done a deep dive on Lions Led by Donkeys, but it's only because I love Well, There's Your Problem so much. I'm going through the back catalog.
Lions Led by Donkeys is not as funny, and it's really kind of horrible because there's so many military atrocities that they get into real deep detail on, and it's a hard listen. I can't really recommend Lions Led by Donkeys. If you find it yourself and try it, more power to you, but I'm not going to be like, hey, let's listen to this hilarious podcast about war crimes.
Well, I cried last week because I saw a tree and it looked sad.
This might not be the podcast for you.
Maybe I'm not that hardcore.
The miniseries on Nanking had a...
Oh, no.
Okay.
Go fuck yourself.
No. It had a special bonus feature where anytime Liam was too stressed out, the host would bust out cute animal facts to sort of bring the room back to level.
How do you...
But we stabbed them and killed them. Dead bodies don't talk.
I'll take an animal fact, please, so I don't throw up in my mouth.
Pollinating makes bees sleepy. So sometimes they take a little quick nap on top of a flower.
Aw, that's hard workers.
Those animals had to be pretty fucking cute.
Yeah, because so much of that podcast is just Liam going, Jesus, fuck. Okay, and here's a cute fact about the eye, which lives in Madagascar. Here's a picture. He's like, okay, that's pretty cute.
Yeah, you can't even Google Nanking. Oh my God, no.
Nope.
What a nice off-ramp that was. Here, welcome to the Cussler Hustlers. Have you heard of Nanking? It was terrible. Children.
I'm going to have to bleep that.
Happy Wednesday.
So yeah, Darius eventually shoots Pitt,
Through and through.
The entire chapter is Dirk explaining Von Til's plan to Von Til explaining his plan back to Dirk explaining the rest of the plan back to Von. Like, it's talking. Dirk.
It's monologuing.
Yeah.
It's bad guy monologuing.
Yeah, but it's
and
bad
the
guy.
bad guy's like, you're right, but I'm more right.
It's bad guy and good guy monologuing. They're monologuing back and forth to each other. And this is where all the things that happened off screen, all the clues that Dirk saw that he was like, aha, a clue, but they didn't actually put it down in words in the text. This is where everything comes out. This is where the plot of the story happens in chapter 17 and only chapter 17.
Yes, this is where it comes together and we see that Dirk does in fact have a beautiful mind. The clues fall into place.
Yeah.
There's the pi symbol, there's a radical symbol. He's found a new prime number. He's got it all figured out.
Von Til's niece isn't actually Terry. She is a plant because he hasn't seen his niece in 20 years, so they just found somebody who'd looked like her.
So that begs the question, why did he have to, if he already knew that, why did he have to verbally harass her when she was on board the ship?
Well, because he wanted to make her angry and drop that hint about how he had a map about the cave, so she would run off and tell somebody. Like, he was. I mean, Dirk's plan is terrible, obviously.
But you can just say, I can't sleep right. I can't.
Yeah.
Go to Pound Town with you, honey. I've got to sleep off this valuable information because I'm gonna take action on it. You don't have to make her cry. Because
Dirk is bipolar and yelling at women is the manliest thing you can do. He spends a lot of this book yelling at women. I mean, he opens by hitting her. He backhands her across the face on the beach. Don't forget that's how this whole relationship starts.
She does have well, maybe that's her kink. I'm not going to say anything about that.
But that's also where Al's Mauser came from, because it was taped to Terry's thigh when they kidnapped her. And Al just never thought to tell him this until, 8 chapters later. And Al's had the gun the entire time, including when they were all being killed by Darius.
Well, maybe if you treat him nicer, if you give Al some credit for being a human being with thoughts and feelings, he would have told Dirk sooner about the gun. But maybe some dark thoughts were going through Al's mind, and he was keeping the gun under wraps. It wasn't registered to him. You could wipe off fingerprints. Nobody has to know nothing.
Mm-hmm. Next is 8 pages about how Von Til is actually Admiral Erich Heibert, the commander of Nazi Germany's transportation fleet, fanatical Hitler follower, and the brother of Kurt Heibert, the World War I flying ace who flew the Hawk of Macedonia in World War I. Again, this is all information that Dirk Pitt got off-screen, off-page, when he sent messages to the German Naval Archives and got them back from the young black radio operator on the first attempt, but isn't revealed.
Give that man a name! Give that man a name!
But isn't revealed until now. So Von Til is a high-ranking Nazi, actually.
Well, we got Nazi vibes from the jump there, so that was not a dun-dun-dun. That wasn't he's really dead. The boy doesn't see just dead people. He sees a lot of dead people. It was a Sixth Sense reference. Oh, we connected. They go into so much detail about how he asked for one record, and then that came back, and it wasn't a resemblance, so he asked for another record. He was doing things by fax and by presumably mail that would take ages to get all these records back. Even to get a fax in the 70s, here, it's 3 pages, it'll take 24 hours.
On a boat in the Mediterranean.
We could do 1 page an hour.
Oh yeah, and he also realized that Dirk finds out that Darius is the mole when the radio on the Queen Artemisia was set to the same frequency as the radio in Inspector Zakynthos' office. Which, doesn't that mean that it would be Inspector Zakynthos?
It could have gone either way there. That was confusing. Also,
but again, more information that happens off screen. Like, Dirk looked at the radio, aha, and moved on. And then 8 chapters later, we get this information.
He moves on to say that he knew it wasn't Zach. It had to be Darius, because Darius was the one, according to Al, that Al observed Darius at the radio exclusively.
Oh, I must have missed that line.
It wasn't gripping, but it was shoved in there. It was shoved in there to narrow the point.
Yeah, but
I think he caught that, and he was like, "Oh, shoot." Maybe his editor was like, "Hey, dumbass."
All of this could be a great story, but Clive Cussler planted all these seeds. He laid all these breadcrumbs off camera. There was no way to get to this point, like for the reader, if you're the kind of mystery reader who likes to solve it himself or herself, there was no way to get to this point and figure all this out yourself. This is all revealed now.
Yes, and they are also still looking in this tropical marine paradise on his way to get the bad guy. They're still looking at the fish and observing nature in all of its glory while being held at gunpoint. And on the way to being held at gunpoint.
Several times throughout the monologuing, Dirk almost blacks out from pain, but doesn't.
He's really strong-willed.
But then he almost blacks out from pain again, then doesn't.
He waits until the last moment where he's perfectly safe.
Oh, yeah. That's great. So eventually all the monologuing ends, and Von Til is like about to explode. He's changed color. He's vibrating. And he tells Darius to just shoot him in the dick, which I think is what we're all feeling at this point. And then we get to chapter 18, the last chapter. Actually says the last chapter.
It's a threat and a promise.
And I realized I've done most of the monologuing for the last 2 chapters. So do you want to take chapter 18? Chapter 18 starts when who appears wearing an ill-fitting Nazi uniform?
Oh, Al. And he's got the safety on. Oh, the safety off this time.
Yeah, because he shoots Darius in the hand. So Darius drops the gun before Darius can shoot Dirk in the dick.
Which is an impressive feat of aim, and so would shooting anyone in the dick. I mean, it's not like the head or the chest. We didn't get to see that stunt. Al comes through, Dewey Machina, God. Al is a god.
Mm-hmm.
A much maligned god. He comes through in the last second, and he brings the cavalry with him. The floodlights were already on, but as the baddies look around, they realize they're outnumbered. And for anybody who hesitates, Dirk is like, no, look over there, we got you guys.
Yeah, because while there's only 5 goons with machine guns, there's 10 DEA agents with machine pistols, which are way cooler.
This is a proto-DEA, Bureau of Narcotics.
Oh, right, sorry, it's the BON.
The Bon.
Yes.
And so the Darius is injured, and his boss, Zach, does this thing where he says, well, we don't have any traitorous men in the gendarme. So he's given a gun with 1 bullet in it, and he's left free to wander off into a dark corner of the cave to do himself in.
Mm-hmm.
He makes okay with his master, his Lord and Savior, whoever that is, the spaghetti monster, God, Beelzebub. And you hear a faint pop off in the distance, and that's when Dirk finally drifts off to...
There's a lot of snapping on your audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. When Dirk hears that Darius offed himself, that's when he embraces the warm blanket of unconsciousness, and he's carried away.
Yes. Dumped onto a stretcher. He's about to pass out, but doesn't. He tells one of the scientists to tell Rudy Gunn that there's a teaser in the outer cave, which is the fish that they're all here to find. Then Dirk almost passes out and doesn't. And then he asks, what's Terry's real name? And Zach is like, Amy. And Dirk says, I never knew an Amy before. And then he's about to pass out and doesn't. Then Darius shoots himself, and then he passes out. Yes,
it's only with the sound of bullets and mortal wounds. That's the only lullaby that Dirk can go to sleep to.
And it lulls him off to sleep. With the largest, ugliest Greek man blowing his head off.
It's what makes him feel warm and fuzzy. And that's what's described in the book. He does feel the warm fuzziness of unconsciousness taking over once he hears the ensludgeoning of Darius's head.
It's a good word.
Oh, and now we have he's going to do this. He's taking down a drug kingpin who has 130 tons of heroin. And he's looking at the fish. He's still looking at the fish on the way in. He's like, oh, that's the fish.
1 point. 130 tons is 260,000 pounds. Von Til stands to make $500 million, $500 million from this sale. That is $20 a pound. That's cheap is heroin?
Well, how cheap was heroin?
Yes, it was 50 years ago, but really good steak costs that.
Price of heroin, 1970. Well, it's kind of hard because it wasn't in Sears and Roebuck.
I was going to say, also, by the very act of Googling that, you're on a list somewhere.
Oh, I'm on so many lists. I've Googled things about turtles. I probably am on the no-fly list.
You work for the government. You are the list. You can just take yourself off that later.
You know what? Sure.
We're building mythology. Go with it.
It's the ethics I was raised with in the government. A few cents. A dose of heroin would be a few cents.
Yeah, but a pound? Maybe I guess that's nuts though.
But it's also not that much heroin. If it certainly wouldn't have every drug dealing syndicate come out to the bazaar, because one, you wouldn't invite them. Two, there's no like email or Twitter. How do you like get your peeps? Hey, drugs are popping tonight. Because this is a dynamic situation. It's either going to go to Chicago, it's going to go to Texas. Maybe they'll switch up the plans. They could send a boat anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So the baddies don't know where this bazaar is going to be.
Oh, right.
With their drug.
Sorry, that was part of the monologuing where Von Till reveals that the drugs are actually going to Galveston, Texas, and a cat food factory where the heroin will be packaged up into cans of cat food and shipped out to the four corners of America.
That seems like a really expensive way to distribute heroin. You have to pay off the cannery people?
Well, he owns the cannery, I assume. How expensive is a cat food factory in Galveston?
I didn't do my due diligence on that, but you got to pay off the people that put the stuff. They know how to work the machines. You can't get the goon squad is not cross-trained.
Maybe just be like, hey, free heroin if you do this for us.
They're cross-trained like gun knife. It's probably little ladies who are only on like they could use heroin. I know little old ladies, they love their smack. Never mind. I know my grandmother used to bake it into every cake. Yeah, that's some specialized knowledge. You're not going to wander into a factory and with the plunging machines, those goons there's going to be OSHA injuries. People are going to lose fingers. Mm-hmm. Each can is going to cost something, a few cents just to can it. The materials aren't free. You have the lights on. This whole operation is not cost effective. You've got submarines. You've got a lair. You've got some girl's schooling was paid for, her college and boarding school her entire life. The overhead on this entire endeavor for Von Till was extremely expensive.
Yeah, we never meet the real Terry either. Like, because there is a real Terry somewhere who lives in Europe and went to college on Von Till's dime. We only meet the fake Terry.
And we're okay with the fake Terry because we're constantly reminded she's hot.
Oh, yeah.
Total smoke show. So it's fine.
So hot that while wearing a see-through negligee, they don't notice a gun taped to her leg. Well, that's not where they were looking.
Maybe it shifted. Maybe it was a real snatch and grab there. I don't know where she was hiding the gun. But maybe it fell out when maybe it was attached to her leg and he took it surreptitiously. We can think I was a gentleman there.
Probably.
Maybe it fell off while he was picking her up from the couch.
Yeah.
And it didn't shake free from a spot. But ugh.
Anyway.
But this whole it's 130 tons. That seems like a lot because it's tons. You're like, oh, that's a big number. For national distribution? No, not that much. But I say that as an American, and our police officers do pull over people and where it's still illegal for weed. Oh, in my area, they got somebody for LSD, and they try and make it look like they take a picture for the papers, and they try and make it look like so much. But LSD is so small.
I love those pictures, yeah. Look at all this acid we got off the streets, and it's a postage stamp. It's real
close, and they're like, oh, thank God you got all the comments on the social medias were just flaming the cops. Like, oh, you got these miscreants off the street. They were doing 3 miles an hour in their car. They were going to go home and look at the wall. Thank goodness you intercepted them.
I remember that was a big thing last year on social media, how the cops revealed that, as the result of a $27,000 sting operation, they successfully stopped a $500 shoplifting ring. And it was things like diapers and baby food and crackers and stuff.
Oh.
Cost effective.
Oh, it just breaks my heart. Oh, if you see someone stealing baby food, no, you didn't.
Exactly. Anyway, I suppose we should get back to the epilogue and Dirk's final bipolar explosion.
Oh, Dirk in this epilogue is dressed like a whack-ass Buzz Lightyear. He walks into the scene. He's got a cane, and he's wearing a white turtleneck and a green blazer.
And he has a silk handkerchief in the pocket. He's dressed like they're making fun of a yacht captain. That was my first thought, was he's dressed like the millionaire from Gilligan's Island.
Oh. Yes, he's dressed like the Gilligan's Island millionaire. That guy was the voice of Mr. Magoo.
That makes sense.
But he's not the sea captain. He's not the good-natured Buzz Lightyear. He's the Riddler, because he is happy and fickle. He walks in and he looks at the girls, looks at the sea of nylon covered legs that greet him as he gets onto the floor in the office building that he's going to see the head of the narcotics division, director of the Narcotics Bureau. And he goes to the receptionist, and she doesn't recognize him because he's dressed like Yoshi from Nintendo. You know.
And she is, as is repeatedly described, a well-bosomed blonde.
Another properly cantilevered young lady,
Yes.
who is delighted and flustered when he knocks on her reception desk with his cane. This is a crazy man move.
Yeah.
You're not in uniform. You're not wearing a name tag. You don't introduce yourself. Yet you're still pissed off she doesn't know who you are. This is beyond bipolar. He's on meth.
He smashes his cane down, says he's an Air Force major, and he's here to see Inspector Zakynthos of the BON. She freaks out, and he is instantly super charming again, like, oh, okay.
He grins at her. She grins at him. The other ladies sneak looks over their shoulders. They titter. They giggle.
That is one of the worst lines I've read, where he's talking about all the other secretaries in this room and their bovine adoring gaze.
Oh.
Now that he's slammed his cane down and yelled at someone, they're even more into him.
And bovine adoring glaze. Are they chewing cud? That was so insulting. I was furious when I read that
That
line.
was such a weird couple of pages that didn't need to be in this, because next he walks into the office with Sandecker and Zakynthos, and we could have started the epilogue with him walking into the office with Sandecker and Zakynthos.
We need it.
We didn't have to have him go through the government building, ogling ladies wearing nylons and yelling at them.
Yes, but there were so many ladies. There were so many of them. He had no choice. Like when he's dropped off in the epilogue, he's like, "Oh, DC, this is where women work in offices. A man's in his element because all these ladies have the temerity to have jobs and to do things for money, and you can see them just with your eyes. They're right there,
And they have to do what he says."
And there's no behavior in real life that would mimic this and come off as sane. I don't care how good looking you are.
Yeah.
You can be Sean Connery at the height of James Bond fame. If you did this, you'd be carted off by the men with white coats. After going through the labyrinth of ladies, he gets into the office with his cane and his green blazer, which must have been so hot in 1973. I wonder what shade of green. Is it avocado green? He elaborates about everything else. We don't know which shade of green that this is. I would like to think it's Kelly Green. He looks like a leprechaun. He's going in there to discuss the outcome of events.
Yeah. We meet Admiral James Sandecker, who is his direct boss, who is the tiny man with the griffin face and the giant cigar.
Yes. And the director...
He always has the giant cigar.
Yes, dirigible-shaped cigar. So it's narrow on both ends. Which might mean
it's a cartoon cigar.
Might mean something Freudian, too. Maybe it explodes. And the bureau director, or the bureau chief says, they went through with his plan, and they had the fake ship, or the real ship, dock and intercept the baddies in the port of Galveston, and it was indeed a cat food cannery that they caught the drug smugglers in Galveston.
Yeah, and they arrested like half the drug dealers in the country because they all showed up for, Heroin Con 73.
And they went on to describe how the heroin was going to hit the streets and ruin America through and through, but now there's going to be a 20-year drought of heroin. There is no void to be filled. This vacuum is a constant. Now there is just no drugs for the next 20 years. Heroin free in the U.S. 1973.
Just like what happened in real life.
I feel like that conversation could have been a phone call. You didn't have to spend taxpayer money to get him on a plane.
Yeah, and they do mention that he flew back to America on an Air Force cargo plane, and we'll get to the punchline of that in a minute.
Yes, because he took a souvenir, yet to be named souvenir. And while he's at the director's office, the director fields a call. This was confusing to me. The director fields a call for Sandecker to say that the fish that they've caught, the teaser fish, Sandecker's now grandpa, the teaser fish was pregnant. Woohoo!
Yes. They found the missing link fish, and they just had to wrap up the last plot thread.
Who called him? How did they get his number? Why was that call going through the Bureau of Narcotics? Was the switchboard operator very confused? Why did she let that call go through?
It all happens in one room. It's a lot easier that way.
Yes, and then they freeze frame while high-fiving each other.
No, the freeze frame is in a couple of pages. So Al and Zach and
Why was Al
Dirk
there?
Pitt-
Why was taxpayer money spent putting Al? He's a sidekick. He's not in the
because
main
that's
room.
his sidekick. You have to have the sidekick there.
There's memos. He could have just been sent a memo.
But then you wouldn't have the other high five and freeze frame punchline in a second. So all three of them are outside the government building, and Von Tell's Maybach, the one that was driven by Willie the bus driving Nazi at the very start of the book.
Oh yes,
Only now it's being driven by Terry, aka Amy.
yes. This Maybach, which was owned by a Nazi and probably taken from a Jewish family that was eradicated and deserves that, their lineage deserves their goods back.
I'll take an animal fact, please.
Dirk Pitt seems to have no qualms about, like, yeah, spoils of war. I get it now.
Mine now. I get the car and I get the lady.
It's how it works. He was assigned both of these things: spoils of war and the lady assigned to him by the government, and they drive off into the sunset, jumping high five.
He gives the cane back to Al because he's like, I'm not going to need this anymore because I'm going to be laying on my back. I won't need to be walking. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Oh, I took that to mean he wasn't injured enough to actually need the cane. He just wanted to terrorize secretaries with it.
Either one's good.
Both. Get the beef and the chicken.
Dirk and Amy drive off. Al and Zach look at each other and decide to go get drunk, and they link arms and walk off into the sunset.
Because let's be honest, the government workers, they're already drunk.
Yes. It's the 70s.
Nothing from what I know about government work in the past leads me to believe that anything would have gone differently. If he wanted the car, yes, the U.S. government would have flown that back under, with a wink and a nod. Lots of things were flown back after World War II, after Korea, spoils of war wise. That was just, it's in the transport. You grease some bombs, you get these knickknacks. So
yeah. Nazi rocket scientists, Nazi cars. I mean, it's basically the same thing.
Paperclips, Operation Paperclip.
It's a really big paperclip. 1928 Maybach Zeppelin. So, you're right. 1928 is probably. if that came from Nazi Germany, there's implications.
Yeah, you can be like, wow. Think it through, Dirk. Where did this car come from? Did he pay for it himself? He went to the dealer?
Oh, yeah. And I guess there's one final note in that meeting with Sandecker that Von Tell was sent back to Germany and he was hung for being a Nazi. The end. And they just spare one sentence for it.
Oh, yeah, because you don't want to... the Germans didn't want that in the news again. They were sick of all the Nazi hoopla. Which, by the 70s, nah, bitch. You still own that. You guys are barely grandpas.
Mm-hmm.
Take the hit again. You can have the bad press.
And that concludes the first Clive Cussler novel, or at least the first published Clive Cussler novel, The Mediterranean Caper.
And it was delightful. And its silliness and everything about it was very delightful.
He didn't have the formula down yet, but all the main parts are there.
The joys there. You could tell he really loved writing this. And he loved writing in all of the... this was pre-fandom. This was when it wasn't cool to like things, and he was expressing everything he liked: the submarines, the aircraft, the cars, the ladies. Yeah. He really liked the ladies, or hated them. I really can't tell.
Yeah, it was the synthesis of all the books and movies he liked, because this was pre-Indiana Jones, but this was definitely early James Bond. This was coming after the whole pulp adventure novel craze, and he wasn't an old man. I think he was about 40. Early 40s when he started writing this. Well, and as a writer in his early 40s, I just can't identify with that at all.
My daughter wanted Taylor Swift tickets, and she was like, "Mom, you don't understand. She's almost 40. This is going to be her last tour. She's getting old." I was like, "She's 32. And what do you think happens when you turn 40? You just get assigned a walker and mushy food. No one lets you outside again." 40's pretty young, and he was diving into his passions, and it wasn't War and Peace. I wasn't moved, other than the silliness of it and the what went for standard male behavior as written in pop culture back then was hilarious. Because were men walking around slapping women willy nilly like this on the beach for sex? Slap in their staterooms on a boat for sex? Slap. Was that really foreplay in the 70s all the time?
That's one other thing.
Because I was born in 78, and I don't know. I don't like that origin story for my parents.
That's something that they never explain. Okay, so Terry, aka Amy, worked for the Bureau of Narcotics. She was a plant to get into Von Till's villa and try and get information out. Does that mean her actual husband died and she's been celibate and faking crying this whole time? Or was that all just an act and just Dirk slapped her for doing a good job? Like, we never actually figure out if that's it. Like,
alternate scenario, she's a well-trained agent placed undercover, and she slaps him back and knocks him out. And this is all a dream while he's drowning on the beach in low tide.
Yeah, it's obviously not better if he slaps somebody whose husband didn't die, but that, like, everything just repaint that.
That's a very funny sentence. That's a very funny sentence. It's not good to slap a woman whose husband didn't die. Good job.
That first scene is even more confusing now. Oh, also, Amy/Terry doesn't get any lines at the very end in the epilogue. She drives up, she's driving, she's hot, everyone stares at her, Dirk gets in, they drive off. She doesn't say a word.
He's already beaten her down.
She doesn't say a word from the moment she storms out of Dirk's quarters on the first attempt after telling him that she wished that he'd actually died. and then we see her now and everything's fine. The end.
It was not described if she had one black eye or two. Like, what do you tell a woman with two black eyes? Nothing. You already told her twice. The domestic violence joke.
Yeah, we got that joke up here. Yeah.
Maybe she's learned her lesson, and now she knows her place. And her place won't be her place won't be in the next book.
Nope. So he's not great at writing women yet. He gets a little better. I guess we'll find out.
He gets marginally lateral. He gets lateral improvement. They never develop agency.
Hooray!
But they have more flourishes. More flounciness, more bounciness.
Yeah, we definitely get to a point where he's very progressive for the 70s, and then somehow he goes backwards and he's really regressive for like the 90s. So that'll be a fun path to chart.
That will be. Maybe he was going through something like gout or something, and he had to take it out on his characters.
Fucking women.
Fucking women, gout. Arr.
I'm glad I don't have editors yet.
I have some closing questions to ask you because you're a man of science.
Why, thank you.
Now, in the epilogue, they say that 130 tons of heroin they were tipped off. They knew which canning factory it was going to be dropped off at because they had received a shipment of sugar. Everyone in the know knows that you cut heroin with sugar or baby laxative.
Yeah. Which
I've had babies who have desperately at times needed laxative. There's no such thing as baby laxative. That's not a product on the market. So they got the cats don't have sugar in their food, clearly. This cat food factory got a fuck ton of sugar delivered. They're getting the heroin. And this heroin was gonna be cut. So I ask you, when you cut 130 pounds of heroin with sugar, let's say it's an equal amount of sugar, 130 tons of sugar, do you have more heroin or less heroin?
Well, I mean, you have more because now it's gone from being, the raw, uncut, pure stuff to street grade, as is my understanding from every cop show I grew up watching. Now you've got street grade heroin. But
still just 130 tons. It's like a pound of feathers, a pound of bricks.
But now it's 130 tons of raw heroin plus 130 tons of sugar gives you 260 tons of street heroin.
But that's safer heroin.
Yeah.
But it's not of actual heroin. It hasn't multiplied.
No, it's the same amount of...
It's diluted.
It's the same amount of heroin, but now there's more heroin asterisks may contain sugar.
Okay. Is that diabetes safe?
I mean, you're not eating it. Yeah, you are injecting it.
Okay, now for not your area of science, but psychology. The locals, they wouldn't catch on to the fake seaweed?
I mean, the locals, I'm assuming, wouldn't be diving in the cave because that was in the cave, not outside of it.
Well, they said they weren't afraid of an errant diver here or there, but like a research vessel, they couldn't risk that.
Yeah.
But I think the locals would be like, that kelp looks weird.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, that's an interesting little throwaway line that this fake kelp here so the locals don't notice. Okay. And then the last thing, as Von Til is monologuing, he goes on to explain how the biplane, the Albatross D3, suited his purposes for being more aerodynamic than anything else at the moment that he could have. I've never heard of a biplane being more aerodynamic than anything that came after it.
I think the issue with the biplane was they needed something that could go slow enough to land on that Japanese I-boat submarine.
Ah, so it was a factor of that. Okay.
Yeah, because I actually looked that up earlier because I was curious, and there are models of biplane that can get down to like 25 miles an hour without stalling.
Oh, okay. Well, I know in Russia, though, during World War II, the women were given World War I aircraft. They were called the Night Witches, and they shut up their engines and go down low.
Yeah, that rules.
That does rule. It was a really great name. God, branding is everything.
Every time I see the Night Witches pop up somewhere like online or in a meme or something, every comment is, where the fuck is this movie?
I think back to when I was in
Is there a Night Witches movie?
No, not that I know of.
Edit out my typing. Yes, there was one made in Russia in 1981.
Oh, I missed it.
And that's all we got, yeah. Oh, you missed it? Oh, you must see it.
I was 4. I didn't have a passport. But
now I gotta find this. It's called In Flight Are the Night Witches. I gotta find that now.
I think back to growing up in Brooklyn, and when I was a kid, there was a huge influx of Russian people, of Russian community developed, Brighton Beach, all of that. And so I knew Russian and Polish people left and right, and lots of little ladies, the ones that would make us cookies if you came to play with their grandkids or whatever. And looking back, after knowing about the Night Witches, how many of those little ladies were stone cold killers? Because they would have been in geography that was in the thick of it when they were young women. So looking back on it, you don't know what grandma and grandpa were doing when they were your age.
Nope. And I probably don't want to know.
Oh, definitely not. Let's leave that up to the mystery. Like how much our parents were slapping each other before we were conceived. Well, Topper, it's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to do the next one. Are we going in chronological order?
Yeah, so the next book would be Iceberg! Exclamation. Actually, no, that one doesn't have an exclamation point, does it? Because I know Night Probe has an exclamation mark. A bunch of them have exclamation marks. Nope, this one's just Iceberg, 1975.
I can't wait for Night Probe now. Lock your doors. The iceberg is coming. Thank you, listeners, if there are any. And thank you for listening to this. And have a great evening, morning, night, wandering the desert, wandering the cities. Have a good one, wherever you are.
This has been Cussler Hustlers. Your hosts have been Topper and Nancy. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at Cussler Hustlers.